Hey everybody, it is Ribo at the bench again today doing another pocket knife review on this Gerber Paraframe Mini. So this is a smaller, I guess the smallest version of the Paraframe series by Gerber, and I think it retails for around $10. I picked this up at Target several years ago. Target sells a lot of Gerber products. Gerber, if you don't know, is owned by Fiskars. Fiskars that makes obviously famously scissors, but also more recently has been known for garden tools, pruning shears, things like that. I've been very impressed with Fiskars scissors and pruning shears in the past, and I generally like Gerber design. Although I think the quality, is not quite there with what you generally see in the knife industry. But I don't really want that to discount it totally as a brand. So I picked this guy up, and I used this knife as a carry knife for a little while just to test it out, and have kind of used it off and on since. So wanted to share some thoughts today. All right, so let's get into it. So price, I talked about, this is a very budget knife. I think I paid $10 or around $10, maybe a little bit less a few years ago. I did check the Amazon product page, and this knife was going for, I believe, around 12, 13 bucks. So you can pick this one up for, not that much. Although I probably don't recommend that you do if you watch the rest of the video. So let's do a size comparison. So this knife is really small. Here's my hand. Here's the knife in my hand. This knife is fairly small for kind of what your initial impressions are. You would probably look at this thing and think it might be a little bit bigger, and that's really because the Gerber Paraframe series has 8 knives, and so really there's not a ton that's different in terms of design between them, except for maybe a thumb stud here or there, little things like that. But when you put it up next to things, here is a slightly larger Buck 382. That's kind of your Texas toothpick. This is your classic kind of wooden brass slip joint, gentleman's pocket knife. Move that one down here. This is also a classic kind of that wooden brass look pocket knife. There's a sharp 800. This is actually a lockback knife with a broken off tip. And then the classic Victorinox Swiss Army knife. And really, this is kind of what I would compare this to. Well, maybe a combination of these two is what I think this knife should be. However, it is not. And maybe let's add one more in here. This is a Spyderco Honeybee that I keep on my keychain. Great little slip joint pocket knife to keep on the keychain. And so I guess really what I kind of had hoped for from this knife was a combination of this. And what I got wasn't quite that. Long story short, what I really think this knife lacks is a purpose. To me, this is a very confused knife. I don't know why it exists. I don't know why you wouldn't just carry up and get a little bit bigger paraframe knife, or why you just wouldn't get something like the Honeybee that can be added to a keychain, or just something like this, or really this that can just be slid into the pocket. But I'll get into all that in a second. So there's your size comparison. All right, so let's talk a little bit about ergonomics. So ergonomics are pretty good for such a small knife. I mean, obviously this thing is really, really tiny. It's pretty thin because it's just a liner lock. A frame lock, and so there's no liners. And so it's really thin. The clip really messes though with the grip. And this is one of the first things that is going to really upset me about this knife, is this clip. And really the reason for that is I just don't know why Gerber includes a clip on this knife. Sure, include one on the other 7 Paraframe knives, but this guy is so small I can't imagine ever clipping this to the pocket and carrying it like a regular carry knife. For one thing, you might be laughed out of town by any other EDC person, but on the other hand, like it's so lightweight, it's so small, why not just slip it in the pocket like you would a classic Buck or even a Swiss Army knife? If you don't want to carry this guy on the pocket, why not add some paracord to this and just use it that way, kind of add a little lanyard or a keychain. The problem is, Gerber has, I guess in my opinion, a very serious design flaw in this knife, in that this looks like the ultimate in kind of keychain, paracord, lanyard friendly knives, because the whole thing is really a spot for a lanyard. However, the issue with this, obviously, as you can see, is when you close this knife, that exposed edge is right there. And so if you add any kind of lanyard there every time you open or close your knife, you're just going to be constantly wearing that guy down. So serious design flaw. If you look at a bunch of other knives, let's just throw the Honeybee, obviously, the Swiss Army knife, even this Sharp. Shoot, I mean, Kershaw Skyline, Ontario Rat. Let's dig into my pocket here. Spyderco Delica. I could go on and on with knives that I've got around here that all provide some way of attaching either a lanyard or a keychain. And sadly, this little guy does not. The next thing on Ergonomics that's seriously lacking is that Gerber actually on their site lists this knife as a one-handed operation knife, which is just insanely laughable. I mean, this is not a one-handed knife. I challenge anyone to open this guy one-handed without the use of a table or something like that. You just can't do it. Maybe I can do it, but see, I'm about to cut myself. This knife has no thumb stud because it's so small, so there's no way to like quickly deploy this knife. This knife just has this little kind of nail nick right here, which is not really deep enough to really do anything with, besides kind of get a grip if you're using two hands. And it uses these plastic washers, which means that this knife is just as stiff now as it is the day that I bought it, and it's not going to loosen up anymore. So this is not a quick deploying knife. Like I said, I think of this knife as more of your classic, kind of slip in the pocket knife, and that's fine. I really enjoy having a knife that I can slip down with my wallet, that no one sees, and that I know that I've always got on me, especially if you can't carry a big knife clipped to your pocket all the time. The problem is there's a pocket clip, and there's a really bad pocket clip. I mean, to me, it's just not very useful. It's not a very good one. It's really tight. And it's just kind of like, why would you put that there? So I'll probably remove mine, but I left this for the purpose of this demo. Plus, if you remove this knife really starts to disappear in the pocket, which I think would be a really good thing for a knife of this size. And I would really like this knife a lot better if it didn't come with that. All right, so ergonomics we talked about. Let's talk about steel a little bit. So the steel on this knife is, well, I don't know what it is. Gerber refuses to release what kind of steel they use in their pocket knives, and so this is some kind of Gerber mystery steel, which always just gives knife enthusiasts a lot of confidence in their knives. Yeah, not so much. This steel is fairly soft, but I actually haven't hated it. It's been fine, about what I expect. It's just listed on their site as stainless steel. But one thing I will note about this steel, whatever it is that it is the least stainless steel of any stainless steel knives that I've ever had. I use this guy to sharpen pencils a lot, and you can tell that I've used this guy to sharpen pencils a lot. This is, let me see if I can get this in focus. This is after washing this knife off several times, and you can still see graphite there on the tip. The camera doesn't quite pick it up as much as it is in person. Contrast that with something like your Kershaw Skyline, which has a very similar blade, and you'll see that the Skyline really stays pretty clean, and I use this guy even more than I do this. And so I've just noticed that this knife, this steel, whatever, tends to pick up a little bit more wear than other knives, which is, whatever, it's a $10 knife. The other thing about the steel, so it's fairly easy to sharpen, and this will get into the blade design and the lockup. But one thing that drives me absolutely crazy about this knife is that so first of all, I love the blade design. This is a little clip point. I think it's a really just nice looking blade design. It's really functional. if I could actually get it in focus here. Will I get it in focus? Nope, I will not, so I'll leave it down here. So this is a really nice blade design. I think that this is just a really utilitarian design here. I really like that. I like the nice long edge we have here. But what drives me insane about this is that right here, there is a gentle S curve in the blade. And so when you go to sharpen it, and you can see that right there, the wear pattern is different. You can see it right there. It's not perfectly straight right here, and so there is a little curve in there. So if you're sharpening this on some kind of whetstone, you're going to have to basically grind down on this blade until you've got a continuing line right here, which is just really, really, really dumb, especially since it's invisible to the naked eye and it's a $10 knife. This is not something that you want to spend time sharpening. It's not a recurve blade. And so why on earth would Gerber put this very very small curve in here, because practically all that does is mean you get really sharp here, you get really sharp here, and then you've got this really dull point here, which is just super annoying to me. So overall lockup is pretty good. Like I said, this is a frame lock. It does have a satisfying sound when it locks up. Let's see if I can get that on camera. Yeah, you probably can't hear that, but good lockup overall. One thing I think you can see on camera there are the plastic washers. One thing that I don't like about this knife, and it really doesn't matter at all except for people who are OCD like me, the washer on this side is much larger than the one on this side, and this has kind of a stop point. Most knives have a stop point at 50% right there. This knife actually has one more at about 80%, and I'll show that locking right there. You'll see a little ball catch right there, if you can see that on camera, but also basically at that point right there is where the frame comes in from the handle past that smaller washer. So if you kind of line that up, you can see that if it were on the other side, that frame would still be held back by the washer. And so it just kind of highlights the fact that it's different on each side. Not a big deal, but just kind of something that I noticed pretty immediately with this knife. Plastic washers, this knife is never really going to loosen up. This thing is really stiff. It's never going to be a quick deploying knife. I'll look and see if I can get to my Kershaw CQC. Yes, I can. So my Kershaw CQC 7K also plastic washers, except for I've modified mine. Even with the plastic ones, this one is a little bit smoother operator. But like I said, for a knife that you're going to slip in the base of your pocket, not a huge deal at all. So that's about it for this knife. What would I improve? Well, I guess cut or carry first. This is definitely going to be a cut for me. Practically speaking, it'll probably be a carry, because what I've done is just slip this into my fly fishing bag, just so I'll always have a knife that I don't mind losing when I'm standing in the middle of the river. And I've used it several times for that when I've gotten line caught up in the trees or whatever, and I can't really get out. I've always had this knife kind of strapped to me, that I'll kind of find it after 6 months of non-use, and I'm like, oh yeah, there's my little paraframe. But practically speaking, this knife doesn't get a lot of use besides that. What would I do to improve this knife? Well, first of all, I would remove this pocket clip, which I plan to do this weekend. If I were Gerber manufacturing this knife, I would either size it down a little bit and make this a keychain knife, or just improve the open and closing, ship it without the pocket clip, and put a lanyard on this and make this just your classic kind of gentleman's folder in the pocket. So all in all, not a terrible knife for 10 bucks, but probably not one that I'm going to carry in the future. All right, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.